selection in the 2020 NHL Draft belongs to a team yet to be determined, coming from the qualifying round in the Stanley Cup playoffs.
And that means that the Los Angeles Kings will select number 2 overall.
All right. Welcome back, Kings fans, to a special edition of All the Kings Men Live. As you just saw, the LA Kings will be picking 2nd overall in the 2020 NHL entry draft. And as we all know, the Kings have had some pretty good luck picking 2nd overall, most recently in 2008. Let's take a little trip down memory lane and see how that went.
With the 2nd selection from the Ontario Hockey League's Guelph Storm, Drew Doughty.
What he's got is he's got a level of hockey sense that cannot be measured.
I love the game of hockey. I'll do anything to become the best player I can be. I want to be on the LA Kings. I always have been, and it's a dream come true.
He skates well, he's mobile, he handles the puck well, he has a sense of timing to jump up and make unbelievable plays.
That all just comes straight out. This guy's a Hall of Famer.
Drops it off for Doughty. Kempe back to Doughty. He scores! Doughty, a shot. He scores! Drew Doughty with the answer.
This defenseman, the way he plays, this is not an easy guy to play against.
Martin across for Doughty. Big drive. He scores!
And royalty reigns again in the NHL.
And he's just gotten better and better. He's one of the special players in this league for sure.
2016 Norris Trophy goes to Drew Doughty.
Doughty over the line. Final seconds of overtime. Doughty to Foley. Save. Crawford. Doughty loose puck. They score! Kings win in overtime.
So there you have it. Drew Doughty taken 2nd overall in that historic draft, with Steven Stamkos going 1st overall to the Tampa Bay Lightning. And just a reminder for you folks out there, the LA Kings, the winner of the Stanley Cup on 2 separate occasions. Tampa Bay, still no cups with Stamkos. Obviously, they won it before he was drafted there. In a moment, just one moment, we're going to bring Mark Yannetti in to talk about the draft, to talk about his reaction. But I just want to encourage everybody, if you're listening or watching on YouTube, on Facebook, or on Twitter, if you want to have a chance to have your comments read, you got to join us on the Twitch channel. Thanks to everybody who is already joining us on the Twitch channel. Now, joining me, Director of Scouting, Mark Yannetti. How are you doing, Mark?
Oh, doing well. Obviously, we moved up, so it's
That's
not
right.
When they flipped that card over, it looked like the LA Kings logo too. I was
Yeah.
for a second, it was like a team,
Yeah.
But no, we're obviously pleased.
I had my elbow back for a fist pump when I saw the top of that logo, and then I had to downshift into it. Oh, all right. Well, 2nd overall. But you look, your beard would go 1st overall in a beard draft. That's impressive.
This beard's been shaved twice since
Oh, wow.
since the pandemic too.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so let's talk about that. Going into this, I mean, I had talked myself into the notion that they would wind up, or that we, I suppose, would wind up drafting 7th. But it winds up being 2nd. Now, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but there's a stat that gets floated around every time a draft comes around that, only so many 1st overall picks have actually won the Stanley Cup in recent seasons. 2nd overall, just from a possibility standpoint, seems to me like the most interesting pick. You've got your work cut out for you over the next few months, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, without giving away trade secrets, I mean, if you finish 1st, it's a pretty easy pick this year, right? So finishing 2nd's a wonderful thing, but it opens up a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of good work. But it's nice because you get to control. You don't sit there and wait at 3 or wait at 4 or sit there at 7 and say, God, I hope this guy falls to us. Or please, you're crossing your fingers saying, please don't pick, so and so at 6. So, yeah, I mean, it allows us a certain amount of control over our own destiny.
I mean, one way of looking at it would be, because Lafreniere is is just the obvious 1st pick. The Kings actually have the 1st pick. since he's, a lock to go to whatever team winds
Well,
up
you
with.
never know. We might have had him at second, so we're hoping to
That's
pick our
true.
guy at second. Right?
That's true.
No, you're right. I mean, again, yeah. I mean, since there's a, I guess nothing's written in stone, obviously, but even in the, it parallels the Stamkos draft, right? Everybody, Tampa came out and said they were taking Steve. We talked to Steve. Mike Futa knew Steve really well, and he had told us the conversations and said that Tampa was taking him. So it's very similar. We basically had the first pick in that draft because you didn't, you knew Stamkos was gone, and then we had to decide between Drew and 3 other people. So
if the draft were taking place during a normal schedule, it would have been sometime during this week probably. There would have been a combine, there would have been a Memorial Cup, there would have been all these workouts and interviews. I think it's easy to say that Lafreniere definitely would have gone first overall, but we still have who knows how many months. How has this season and all of the challenges that have come with it changed the prospect of scouting for a draft? I mean, you don't have a combine. They didn't finish the season. There's tons of games and high pressure situations that you don't get to see. Will that play a role in the ultimate draft ranking?
Well, I mean, it's a little piece of information you don't have now. You don't the draft combine interviews. They're a little more like window dressing for me. It's a chance for Rob to get to meet some of the guys that he wouldn't have met during the season face to face. It's a chance to talk, especially with the North Americans. That work's been done. Our scouting staff is required to log certain conversations, to check certain boxes in terms of interviewing, vetting, whatever term you want to use for these guys. So 95% of the heavy lifting's done interview-wise before the combine. The one thing you miss is it's a little bit hard to get all of the Europeans done during the year. And Christian Rutu does a great job, and I get over there with Christian and we talk to them. But that's probably the biggest piece that the combine that we'd be missing with the combine is the Europeans. And then there's a couple of Europeans we obviously would take extra time with there. So that's probably it's a small hole, and it's a hole that's fixable by doing a little bit extra work, whether it's on Zoom or Team or whatever platform you use, Skype, whatever it is, to talk to the guys.
Obviously, getting the second overall pick is great, but the Kings will have 10 other picks throughout the other 6 rounds of the draft. It's supposed to be an incredibly deep draft, from what I'm told. The Kings have 3 picks in the second round, if I'm not mistaken. So what is the likelihood of using some of those picks to move back up into the first for another first-round pick?
It's hard to do it not, I don't want to say in the moment, but we don't know who's there right now. At 35, we don't know who's there. We don't know who's there at 26, at 20. It's getting very hard to move in the first round. I think at one time first round picks were vastly undervalued. People used to throw them around like Tic Tac. I think first round picks now are slightly overvalued, and it's getting really hard. Even if you make a credible offer, it's harder to move up when you're not in the first round into the first round. We've even seen it's even hard to move up a little in the first. I think it cost a second round pick last year to move up 3 spots. With Philadelphia was involved in the trade, if I remember. But looking at that, if there was a player, if there's a player sitting there at 23, 25, we probably have the ammunition to get somewhere in the late first round with what we have. The question becomes: is it cost prohibitive? Is it 35 and 43? Is it 35, 43, and so it would have to be a special player to do that. And then you have to determine what are you going to miss at 43? What are you going to miss at 35? I mean, if you want a situation, if we were going to do that last year, there would have been Kaliev and one other guy that we would have considered moving up for, and we got Kaliev at the pick. So, again, you have to look at the situation. We took a calculated risk last year in kind of how we did our draft, thinking that we weren't sure it would be Kaliev, but we thought it would be one of 4 players could fall to that spot. And at 35, I think whatever we picked Kaliev last year, he was the one player still left in that group. So there's a lot of moving pieces that would determine it, but I would suggest moving up to Rob if the right guy was there.
Does the fact that the Kings prospect list is so highly rated, ranked number 1 by a number of different publications, and the fact that you then acquired players like Tyler Madden and guys like Kaliev have been so impressive, does that make it that much easier? I mean, does it just sort of grease the skids a little bit for potential moves, knowing that you have this, stockpile of talent?
Yeah, the stockpile of talent does a couple of things. Obviously, it allows you maybe to be a little more aggressive in some of the things we're doing, since you have a cushion to fall back on. For me, what it says, we have a lot of good prospects, and we have a lot of guys to fill certain roles. But maybe with the depth of our prospect pool, maybe you could argue you do package some of those picks to get a higher level player, since we have a lot of good level players. If instead of blanketing 3 second-round picks with an early, borderline middle and late, maybe you try to get a higher level, maybe you try to get a higher level guy and take 2 guys off the board. Not worrying about it, because we have, in terms of depth, we have a lot of prospects.
Players develop over time, prospects develop over time. I have to imagine that executives and scouts do as well. How do you feel like you've improved in your role over the years? Do you feel like you've got a keener eye now for any what's the word I'm looking for? Potholes that might be lurking out there for a draft?
I hope so. That was instilled on me early with Dean. He didn't listen. We've made some mistakes drafting, just like every other team has. Some of the mistakes were unavoidable, out of our hands, and some of the mistakes were certainly just misjudgments by the scouting staff. But I don't think we've made the same mistake twice. Either philosophically or substantively with the players, because we've made philosophical mistakes as an organization, and we've made substantive mistakes. We picked the wrong player as an organization. And I don't think we've repeated either one of those. So I think we've learned from our mistakes. Obviously, we try to build a better mousetrap every year. I think we made exponential improvements early on, and then we stagnated a little. I'm talking about my tenure there, since 2007. And then I think we had one of those creative explosions about 3 or 4 years ago, where we started to figure things out. Again, a little better. Started to get a little more creative with our thinking. So I think we're better. I think we're a really good staff right now. I like the progress we've made.
As the game continues to grow, a lot of players, a lot of prospects are coming from places that maybe you wouldn't expect. So for even as far back as 2005, you get a guy like Anže Kopitar out of Slovenia. Recently, there have been a lot of German players who have sort of stormed the league. Now, Stutzel, is it Stutzel? That's the guy. How difficult is it to get eyeballs on players in unconventional markets that don't have a great track record of producing high-end NHL caliber prospects?
It's obviously more difficult to go to the non-traditional places. I mean, if you go to Finland or Sweden, there's 20 teams you can drive to, you can take the train to. You can blanket some of these places and see 8 or 10 teams really easily, similar to Canada. And the less traditional, like if you go to Germany, it's fewer games to see, fewer teams to see, so you have to jump around a little bit more. In respect to Germany, one of the things we're real fortunate with is Mr. Anschutz has a team over there in Berlin. So we actually have a really strong presence in Germany with our development staff going over there, with Christian and I going over there. Germany is a very easy league for us to scout. It's a very comfortable league for us to scout because we've had the Germans over since 2007. It might have even been earlier, but since I was there, my first development camp with the Kings, we had teams from Iceberg in. So players from Eisbären in. So Germany's a fairly comfortable place for us. Some of the other places, it's a little harder, obviously, in Switzerland. Like you see Kopitar from Slovenia, but it's becoming more and more rare that you miss guys like that. You just have to do a little more work.
The debate always comes up: do you draft for need or do you draft for best position available? And it feels like at least over the last few seasons, every time we've spoken to you, you lean more towards best position available. Looking at the depth chart that we referenced earlier with all the prospects and everything, it feels like there's tons of goalies. It feels like there's tons of defensemen, tons of centers, tons of wingers. Is there any reason not to go with the best player available strategy?
No, I think I've said this when asked before. I think the biggest mistakes the Kings have made, at least since I've been there, is drafting for need. I think again, it's been the worst things that we've done, the biggest mistakes. I call at least one of them tragic. Drafting for need is dangerous because when you draft for need, very rarely does a player fulfill your immediate need. Since I've been there, we've only had one player fulfill an immediate need, and that's Drew. A guy I don't think was a tragic mistake or a mistake. When Dean we're doing our first draft, he thought we had the worst defensive depth in the league based on our studies. So we wanted to build from the back out, and I like that philosophy. I agreed with it. So we drafted Thomas Hickey. We went D heavy. We drafted Hickey. We drafted a bunch of these D men. Hickey played almost 500 games in the NHL, but by the time he was ready to play for us, he wasn't good enough to play for our team. So that pick is you get a guy who plays 500 games. It looks like a successful pick on the surface, but the fact that not only does he not play a game for the Kings, and we don't get an asset in return, that becomes it becomes a bigger mistake. The mistake gets magnified. It hurts you more. If you would turn Thomas Hickey with Braden Shen into Mike Richards, all of a sudden it looks like a genius trade because you got an asset back for him. We got nothing back for him. So we developed a player for the Islanders to play 500 games, and that was based on drafting for need. So again, a great NHL player, that pick blows up. It blows up in your face. Might be strong, but it's just not the right move. And again, drafting for need. Your needs just change. At one time we couldn't get a free agent goalie to sign with us. We couldn't get Bobrovsky to sign. If I went through the list of names who told us no, there was even a prominent goalie who told us if we drafted him, he wouldn't report because we had such good goaltending depth. 1 year from that, we had no goalies left in the system. The only one we had left was Quick. Jones was gone, Bernier was gone. So again, best player available. They'd have to drag me away kicking and screaming to get me to deviate from that. Now, the only thing I would say is if you have two players that are, let's say coin flip 51, 49%, if they're that close, then position might come into, then a myriad of ways. Like you might draft for need based on size. You might draft for need based on speed, based on maybe the guy's a power play quarterback. Maybe he's a power play forward. If you think the players are that close, then you could kind of finesse it a little, but the players would have to literally be 51-49, 50-50, like that close to deviate from it.
Well, I have to imagine that whoever's available at number 2 in the draft will be the best player available. It should be a real good one. To help us celebrate right now, Mark, joining us is president of the LA Kings, Luc Robitaille. Luc, congratulations, number 2. It's not bad.
Hey, what's up, guys? How are you?
Excellent. How are you doing?
I'm doing good.
So
Mark, what's up, buddy? You got some work to do now.
Yeah, I got some fun work to do. That's good. That's really good.
Luc, when the number 5 card turned over and we all realized it wasn't the Kings, and then we knew in that moment that the Kings had jumped into the top 3, how excited were you that the Kings would be moving up in the lottery and not down?
Well, Blakey confused me at the beginning, to be honest. So he said to me, Blakey says, I think they're only going to show the top 3 teams. And I told Blakey, I said, I don't think so. I think they're going to go from 7 down. So then, he was pretty convincing. So I'm like, okay, they might just show the 3. So we were trying to figure it out. how if it's 3, it's another team, how it's going to be like. So we kind of had it down, but when they started going from 7, 6, and then when it got to 5, and we looked at each other, we say, I don't think we could be 4th. And then Catherine Tappan says the Kings are in the top 3. We were like, yes. But you know, we're hockey people. So the minute you go 3, we're like, man, we got to be number 1. We got to be number 1. That's how you start thinking.
Well, look, there's no cheering in the press box. That's one of the more respected rules. But there could have been cheering, I suppose, on the draft lottery. There was certainly cheering in my room. You guys seemed awfully calm and cool and collected in there. But I imagine now we've got a few months to celebrate the number 2 overall pick.
Yeah, we're trying to. It's one of those. You're trying to be. I guess you're trying to be cool, but we're pretty excited. We trust Mark and his staff. They've always gone above and beyond on figuring out who's the best character, who's the best player. I mean, you look at what was done early on from 2000. What was it, Mark? You started with us in 2006, 2007.
2007.
And you look at the character we brought into this organization, players that it meant something to play for the King. Then you look at now, and even what people are talking about our organization and the pipeline that we have. So we know now this gives us an opportunity to get one more player that will come into our organization, that will mean something to be with the Kings, and knowing these guys, what they're going to do, and when it finally gets to the final decision, because they got a long time, so that means Mark's going to work really hard. I know Mark. There's not, you know, sometimes you could talk about there's no stone unturned. Trust me, there won't be anything unturned in the entire planet to know which guy's the best guy. And so we're going to get a player that's going to really help our franchise, and I think the Kings fans should be really happy about that.
There's been a lot of news coming out about, you know, what the next season will look like, maybe even the season after that, maybe even the season after that. I've been saying for months now, the Kings have actually wound up, I think, benefiting tremendously from the shifting landscape of the league, some of the rules, some of the financial decisions, because the reimagining process is coming at the time that it is. It benefits them. It feels like this could even be one more huge leap forward in the Kings development, because they already have this tremendous depth in the prospect system, and now to get the 2nd overall pick at a time when you have the opportunity to plan, to make sure everything, you know, all your ducks in a row and everything. How important is it for the franchise to get not only the number 2 spot, but also those 10 other picks potentially in the other 6 rounds of the draft?
I think this draft is important to us because where we're at, and we know the players are coming. There's a lot of players with a lot of character coming. They're willing to do whatever it takes to make it to the NHL and to help us win. To have the opportunity to add to that and get some kids that are going to come in, and they're gonna be willing to pay a price to help us win games. And there's a fine line, you know, about making the NHL and then wanting to help make a difference for the franchise. And that's what we're always looking at. And, you know, we were looking into at the end of the year, like Rob does, you know, they have different scouting meetings, and they have development meeting. And then they were going over all the kids that were playing for us in Ontario last year, and some of the kids that are been working out with some of our guys, and it's kind of fun to hear that you know, when you hear that thing was saying, well, this guy, we don't need to look at him, we don't need to worry about him because he's going to do whatever he's asked and more. And we're very fortunate that we have more than we ever thought we even had in our organization. And what that tells me is you're going to get guys that are willing to pay a price to help you win. And we're pretty fortunate right now we have that, and we're going to keep, I know we're going to keep in that same direction in this draft, and we're going to keep building on.
Real quick trivia question for you, Luc. The year you were drafted, 171st overall in 1984, that was the Mario Lemieux draft, but do you remember who went 2nd overall in that draft?
I think Yzerman went 3rd or 4th.
According to this, Olczyk went 3rd. I think Yzerman was a different draft. But according to this, was Kirk Muller.
Kirk Muller went to, where did he go, New Jersey?
Yeah, that's right.
I think Yzerman went 4th in Detroit.
According According to this, I afraid he went fourth. I think it was a different draft, but maybe I'm looking at the wrong year. But
I don't know. Mark would know, but here's what I told people about us getting a second round pick. I said the last guy we got in the second round helped us win the cup, and he was an instrumental player. He's still a big piece. Drew is so important to our franchise. And then the guy before that went second overall was Jimmy Carson. He helped us get Wayne Gretzky.
That's right.
So far the LA Kings have been pretty fortunate though with their second round pick.
Yeah, it turns out all right. Got a couple questions from some fans. Mark, I'll throw this one to you real quick first. They're wondering if there's any prospect already within the Kings system that you think is sort of underrated or doesn't get as much run as the other ones that you think has a potential to jump up and make a name for himself.
Underrated.
Or let's say unsung.
Well, you've got guys like, you got guys like Kim Noisinen, in Finland. He's played on a Spengler Cup team over there that won a championship where he was MVP. He was on the World Junior team. Like, he's a guy that doesn't get spoken of a lot. You hear about a lot of other prospects. So I'd say maybe he's under the radar. I guess a guy who's really under the radar. I know he's obviously a longer shot, but he had a quietly really good year. Was a kid named Anders Lee. He played at U Lowell last year. We drafted him in the 7th round. I would say he's undervalued. He's a 7th round pick. We've actually done quite well in the 7th round. I think we're something at like 39% or 43% success rate. So he's a guy, I guess anytime a 4th round pick has a chance to make it, even if it's an outside chance, he might be a guy, again, to watch for. That doesn't mean he's going to be Drew Doughty. It doesn't mean he's going to be Anze Kopitar. But he's a guy that you would automatically dismiss as a late pick who's had a quietly good year.
Luc, you were a prolific goal scorer and most recently named the greatest player to ever wear the number 20 in league history. So congratulations to you on that. When you're looking at the prospects, do you focus mostly on the goal scorers, or is there a player, maybe a defenseman or a defensive forward or a depth guy that sticks out to you?
To me, Jesse, it's pretty simple. It's obviously you look as an organization where we're at, and what Mark and his staff has done since 2017 is kind of built up a pool of talent and guys. But it's like, I want to have players that are willing to pay a price that no one else is willing to pay to first make it to the NHL and second to help you win. And if you do that, regardless of the position, you're going to have a really good team. You look at our team that won the Stanley Cup in 2012. These guys played like no one else in the history of the NHL has played. That's why they won in the least amount of games, because they were willing to do things that people don't understand is important to win a game. And they sacrifice points, personal rewards to help us win. And then you take it to 2014, where they were maybe a little bit tired, a couple of different guys. And then suddenly, when their back was against the wall, they said, you know what? We could do this. And they did once again something that no one else has ever done, which is win the Stanley Cup in the most amount of games. So when you think about the kind of players we want to get, it's character. That's the number one thing. It's like, obviously the skills, the talent, everything is there when you're picking that high, but you get the right guy with the right person and everything. It's everything. And that's how you build a franchise. That's why Drew and Kopi were so important, and Quickie and Justin Brown. These guys were so important to us when we had our runs.
I'm sure it's impossible to put a direct number on it, but when you're interviewing a guy, when you're sort of trying to get a sense of what that character is, and Mark, we'll start with you on this one. How much of it is learned through watching them on the ice, and how much of it can you glean from interviewing them, from talking to coaches, teammates, family members, whatever it is?
Well, I mean, you take the entirety. Obviously, you watch a player. You can develop an idea of what his character is just by watching him without ever meeting him. And you can watch him in warm-up and see how he approaches warm-up. You can watch him before the game starts and see how he approaches that part of the game. And then obviously you watch the game. Very rarely does someone who bails out from every hit and doesn't see the play that you talk to and say, oh, this guy gets it. So what happens is the majority of the time the interview matches the player. That's the majority. Now, every year there's 4 or 5 guys, 6 or 7 guys that the personality doesn't match it. Albeit whether you thought he was this character guy, and then you talk to him and you're like, oof, or the other way around. That just means you have to start digging. Did you see the right things? Did you, is he a small guy on the ice? Is he not developed yet? But you see the burn in his eyes. All things like that. But usually things line up in a sequential manner where you make your first assessment, the second one matches, the third one matches, you talk to other people, that matches, and then the final one matches. It usually does fall that way, and most people you talk to are on the midline, right? I mean, most of the people you talk to are good kids and good players and want to be NHLers. Very few people you talk to are bad, what you'd call bad kids or low character kids that maybe are selfish or don't care. And then same thing on the other side. Very few players you talk to have that crazy desire in their eyes. Like Wayne Simmons had, like Kyle Clifford had. Things like that. You start looking at a guy like that, and it comes through just in their presence. You could tell that. You could tell that Simmer wanted to do everything it would take to make it. Like, it was right off the bat. You could tell that Cliffy wanted to do everything to make it. Those guys are easy. I mean, they just jump right out at you. But, you take in all the information, and if something doesn't match, you figure it out.
Luc, as a player, I imagine you probably would have developed a radar for that sort of player. You could recognize that sort of spirit in somebody. As an executive, do you find that you've developed a similar kind of radar, whether it's being around the family, being around the scouts, being around the player off the ice, getting a sense for how they carry themselves, how they interact with their coaching staff, their training staff, et cetera?
I mean, I think, for me, like I trust what Mark and his staff, and then Blakey, I know they'll meet with Mark and they'll meet, everybody. And I trust what our guys are doing and I know where they're going. Once they get to the NHL, you see them and so forth, but it's hard, So, I trust the judgment of our guys, what they've gone through and the experience they've had. I mean, you look at, getting a Drew Doughty at the time, I mean, I don't want to speak for Mark, but I'm pretty sure if the Kings would have ended up first, we probably would have taken Drew.
Yep.
And that would have been a very controversial decision at the time because Steven Stamkos was supposed to be number one, but that just tells you. So I know that, and knowing that for me, I think, like Mark and his staff, they'll send me a few videos and I'll watch some guys and I'll watch them, but I'll never know the guys the way they know. I mean, you could tell the way Mark's talking. Like, he'll know the kind of underwear the guy's wearing.
Final question before I let you guys go, and thank you so much for joining us. Mark, any final thoughts on how the draft lottery was formatted, conducted, any changes you would have made or like to see moving forward? Obviously, hopefully we'll never have another scenario quite like this year.
Well, obviously the draft lottery format was almost perfect. I mean,
that's right.
Almost.
Really, it was almost perfect. It was genius the way it was set up. They made one small mistake, and if they hadn't made the small mistake of including the play-in teams, I mean, it would have been Vanguard genius. And again, it would have been completely, it's imperfect. It's imperfect last year when we lose, and it's imperfect this year when we win. I'm not sure the logic or the fairness of having a team have an opportunity to play for a Stanley Cup and be involved in the lottery, and having a lottery team not be allowed to play for the Stanley Cup. Again, but that being said, I haven't come up with a better way to do it. It's the same. It's the same for everybody. I mean, it's the same for Ottawa, same for Detroit, and the same for whatever placeholder team won it. So again, any kind of lottery system, any kind of draft system is always going to be imperfect. If you have no lottery at all, then you get tanking. If you have a lottery, somebody's always unhappy. I'm glad I'm not the guy in charge of it. And I'm glad, I'm glad no one needs my opinion on it. So it worked out for us. It worked out for us almost as well as it could have this year. So we're happy, and just like last year, whoever it didn't work out for, like us, will be unhappy. So every year you're going to have people that are happy, unhappy, and people that are content. This is no different.
Well, Luc, one final congratulations for securing the second overall pick in the upcoming draft. Any final thoughts or words of encouragement for Kings fans who now get to wait
I think
till the
it's time to celebrate for our Kings fans. I mean, they've been very patient. I mean, a couple of years ago, we told them, said, look, we're gonna have to rebuild. We're gonna have to be a little bit patient, and our core friends have stuck with us. They saw last year when the kids started coming up, the difference in the way our team played. And now with this year having the second overall pick and having 3 picks in the second round, I mean, and we got, what was it, Mark? We got 2 in the third round?
Yeah, we got, I think we've got 7.
I think we got 7 picks in the first 4 rounds. So yeah, we're really loaded, and once again, to do something very special. And, this is the right time. I mean, for over 43 years, the LA Kings traded away picks, traded away young guys, and so forth. And then suddenly we decided in 2007-8 to stop doing that, and we won 2 cups. And then the way it was is that's the way the system works is you got to have to trade some guys to keep winning. And then now since 2017, we've gone the same route with a different mentality, different look, and so forth. So this is exciting. This is going to be a lot of fun for the Kings fan. They should enjoy this moment. And when we get back on the ice, I think they'll be excited.
This is hopefully one more step towards winning the Stanley Cup again. For now, thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. And we're going to look back at the first step towards winning that first Stanley Cup, the 2003 NHL Draft, where the Kings wound up with Dustin Brown. Thanks for joining us, guys.
See ya.
Thank you. Thanks, Jesse.
Welcome back to Nashville.
Draft day is a special day for anybody who's been a part of it.
Los Angeles Kings are placed to select.
Going into draft day, you don't really have a team picked out.
From Guelph of the Canadian Hockey League, Dustin Brown.
I remember the Kings table sitting in front of me and knew they were going to pick me.
Scholastic Player of the Year twice.
It was a special moment for me, but it kind of was a blur.
A real character guy.
Kind of think about the team you're drafted by maybe the next day or a couple days after, because at that point you're just so thrilled to be drafted by any NHL team.
Dustin Brown scores! Oh my! Wraparound backhand score! His first NHL goal.
You know, I've always been a King.
So there you have it. That was a look back at Dustin Brown, taken in the first round of the 2003 NHL entry draft. Thanks to Mark Yannetti and Luc Robitaille for joining us, and congratulations to them and to all of us. The LA Kings winding up with the second overall draft pick in the 2020 NHL draft. Who knows who it'll be? It'll be exciting. It'll be fun. Obviously, the number 1 overall pick would have been tremendous, but as we saw with Drew Doughty and Steve Stamkos, and we just heard Mark Yannetti say in 2008, even if they had the first overall pick, they would have taken Drew Doughty. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be a lot of fun. Hopefully the Kings will be able to add to their already deep and highly ranked prospect pool with the number 2 pick, whether it's Byfield, whether it's Stutzel, whether it's any of the other players. Do keep tuning into All the Kingsmen Live and the All the Kingsmen audio podcast. You can subscribe to that at lakings.com/podcast. Over the next month, we are not only going to be doing reviews of the past season and grading some of the players, but also taking a deeper look at some of the players available to the Kings with that second overall draft pick. We'll be talking to play-by-play announcers, scouting experts, coaches, getting as much info as we can for you on who the Kings should take with that number 2 pick, who they might take with that number 2 pick. So when the draft does come around, you'll know who you're rooting for and what the options are for the LA Kings. I want to thank again Luc Robitaille and Mark Yannetti, and more importantly than the two of them, everybody behind the scenes who helped bring this episode of All the Kings Men Live and all the episodes of All the Kings Men Live available to you. I hope we answered your questions. If we didn't, feel free to reach out to us. Let us know questions you want answered in the future. We will go ahead and try and address them in those future episodes that I referenced. For now, however, I'm going to go celebrate. I hope you are celebrating as well. Thanks for watching, Kings fans. We'll talk to you soon.